It's day 26. It's also May 31st, 2019. And we are in Astoria, Oregon. Hey, Oregon, I'm back. You ever wake up in the morning and ask yourself, what am I doing? And more importantly, why? Yeah, me too. Hi, my name's Craig, and this is my story. A story about life. Life out there. For visuals while listening, search Life Out There on your favorite social media platform or use the links in the podcast description. Crossing over from Washington into Oregon at Astoria was kind of a blast from the past. Soaking in the scenery, frequent stops for photos, and yep, I'm reflecting again. Remembering that it had been nearly 30 years since I had visited the Oregon coast. And what a welcome sight. At the same time, I had this weird sense that I was leaving home, Washington, but coming home, in a way, to Oregon. Weird, right? All those years ago, this angry teenager had been yanked out of his senior year in high school, dragged practically kicking and screaming halfway across the country from Minnesota to Oregon, and plopped dead center into small-town USA again. This time, it would be Fall Creek, Oregon. I'd finished my senior year of high school a few miles up the road from Fall Creek in a place called Lowell, Oregon, where I would join a graduating class of 16. I'd quickly fit in, pulling pranks on the librarian, and yes, it involved a fire alarm. Don't judge, we've all done it. Practicing reversal drops in the parking lot of the fish hatchery. Reversal drops, you ask? Well, if you have to ask, how do I... Well, there's a car involved. It's usually full of teenagers, and you need a good amount of space. How much smoke can you produce using only the rear tires of your car and asphalt? It's either super fun or super stupid, depending on whether you're the teenager in the car or the adult parents that own the car. And skipping class to spend afternoons jumping off Fall Creek Dam into the reservoir. Friday nights cruising the gut in Eugene. Day trips to Florence getting lost in the Oregon dunes. Late nights on the beach getting my brand new pickup stuck in the sand. Oh, and the tide was coming in. So having learned that trick of letting a bunch of air out of your tires so you can crawl up out of the sand comes in handy. But then having to drive that brand new pickup from the beach to the nearest gas station at 2 miles an hour at 2 a.m. so you can fill those nearly flat tires back up. Not so handy. Turns out, the cops in Florence, Oregon, in the 80s anyway, had a keen eye. They tended to pick up on weird things, like that blue Toyota pickup crawling up off the beach and along the road at conspicuously slow speeds. And nearly 4 flat tires at 2 a.m. That was a lengthy conversation. And a ticket. Hey, buddy, that's Billie. Come here, man. Well, don't come here then. Where was I? And a ticket. Oh, and even less handy, when you do all this on a first date, there wouldn't be a second date. All this, Oregon, this would be my life. And then, it wasn't. Because yet again, I would leave. But this time, when I left, it wasn't because someone else made me leave. This time I wanted to leave. And that was 30 years ago. There were a couple of holiday visits, but for the most part, it was in and out. I was gone. What I'm really thinking back through was exactly how little I appreciated this part of the country throughout the 8 years I called it home. It was just one more place I didn't want to be. Upon arrival, it was contempt. I mean literally hatred, of a place called Oregon. In the mind of this teenager, it was just some place where it rained all the time and I didn't know anyone. Sure, I'd meet folks. I'd have fun, but I wouldn't admit it. We moved here in November, so definitely the whole rains all the time thing was proving to be true. But then summer came, and even a headstrong teenager has a hard time finding ways to knock Oregon in the summer. You know how us teenagers can be. In fact, to this day, there's a magnet on my mom's refrigerator that reads, "Attention teenagers, quick, move out while you still know everything." So I did, as soon as I could. And then, you know the gig. It's work, 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 some more school, and some more work. And then I left. It's crazy how driving past a sign that says "Welcome to Oregon" can bring all that back. How it could bring me back. But it did, and I'm back. The rugged beauty of the Oregon coast is a sight that everyone should experience for themselves if they can. And Astoria, well, that's a great place to start. Located where the Columbia River meets the Pacific Ocean, the scenic beauty of these two incredible forces of nature meet, and it can be breathtaking. It's no surprise that the natural beauty combined with the engineering feat of the Astoria Bridge has brought Hollywood to the area for years, resulting in movies ranging from the antics of a group of preteens finding a pirate's treasure in Goonies to a visit from Arnold Schwarzenegger in Kindergarten Cop. Even Benji has had adventures here. And I can assure you that this part of the universe, the Oregon coast, is way more than a beautiful backdrop or a B-roll in a Hollywood movie. The City of Astoria official website probably sums it up way better than I could. Quote, "The city of Astoria is located in the northwestern corner of Oregon at the mouth of the Columbia River within a few miles of the Pacific Ocean beaches, with a population of nearly 10,000. As the oldest American settlement west of the Rocky Mountains, Astoria has close historical ties to the Lewis and Clark Trail. In 1811, John Jacob Astor, hence the name, a New York financier, sent fur traders to the area, and the trading post of Fort Astoria was established. Surrounded on three sides by the Columbia, Youngs, and Lewis and Clark rivers, the steep hillsides of Astoria exhibit beautiful Victorian and craftsman homes. River, bay, and forested views abound. Art galleries, restaurants, microbreweries, eclectic shops, and the restored 1920 Liberty Theater reflect a revitalized and vibrant downtown. Family-oriented attractions and recreational activities are plentiful. A 5-mile river walk, hiking trails, aquatic center, numerous parks, boat moorages, the Columbia River Maritime Museum, the Astoria Riverfront Trolley, and the Astoria Column are all within city limits. Ocean beaches, Lewis and Clark National and State Historical Park, and Fort Stevens State Park are just outside the city, creating many opportunities for the Northwest experience." End quote. And not only is Astoria the oldest American settlement west of the Rockies, it's also the oldest city in Oregon and the county seat of Clatsop County. From its founding in 1811 by John Jacob Astor as the first permanent American settlement west of the Rockies, to 1812 when it was sold to the British Northwest Company and renamed Fort George, to 1818 when it was returned to the United States, and in 1846 when the Oregon Treaty ended the joint occupation of the Oregon Country and Astoria becoming part of the Oregon Territory. Then in 1876 when the city was incorporated by the Oregon Legislative Assembly. In 1926 when the Astoria-Megler Bridge was completed, connecting Astoria to Washington State across the Columbia River. At the time, it was the longest continuous truss bridge in the world and was considered an engineering marvel. The 1980s were tough on Astoria. In fact, the 80s were tough on the whole state. Traditional industries such as logging and fishing experienced significant declines, and that took its toll on the area. But just like the rest of the state, Astoria would bounce back. Today, the whole area continues to boom with new hotels, restaurants, breweries, and businesses opening in the city all the time. Each year, over 125,000 people check in at the Astoria Oregon Visitor Center. Who knows how many more come to Astoria and explore on their own? It's easy to do. Whether you're here to do nothing more than take in the natural beauty, the sheer force of nature called the Pacific Ocean and the Columbia River, or maybe you want to visit Fort Stevens State Park, a former military fort that today lets you camp, hike, bike, or walk the beach, all while experiencing a little bit of history. An afternoon spent at the Best of the Northwest Museum is time well spent, discovering the natural and cultural heritage of the Columbia River region. Maybe even a little ride on the Astoria Riverfront Trolley, a historic trolley that runs along the waterfront and offers scenic views of the city and the river. Hop on and off at any one of the frequent stops, showcasing everything from historical sites to the best food the city has to offer. This feels like Oregon. It feels like a place that could change one's perspective, at least this guy's perspective. It doesn't come as a surprise to me that driving by that Welcome to Oregon sign could make me rethink, maybe even re-remember a few things. I'm the same guy with the same memories, except sitting here today in a place that can render you speechless just by looking at it. I think back over that senior skip day, when all 16 seniors piled into 3 vehicles to hit the Oregon coast for a day of troublemaking. How did 16 kids fit in 3 vehicles? There was a pickup involved. Let's just leave it at that. Thinking back on that trip, standing here looking at the Astoria Bridge, I think I smile more now than I did then, actually doing it, living it. Thinking back on our time in the Oregon dunes and remembering all too well why those dune buggies have roll bars. Roll bars are a good thing. The house on Place Road. I would drive past that place again, this go around. This sort of funny twist of fate moment, I guess, as I approached the place, trying to remember exactly where it was on this rural country road. 30 years is a long time, and things change. I'd slow down and be nearly past it by the time I recognized it, and I noticed 2 ladies on the front porch as I went by. I drove up to the next driveway, turned around, and drove past the house again, slowly. This time, the 2 women were studying me pretty closely. No doubt curious about the guy that keeps driving by their house slow and staring. So this time I figured I'd just pull into the driveway, introduce, and explain myself. I quickly explained that I used to live here a long time ago. I explained that my folks had sold the house to move south shortly after I moved out. She asked my folks' name. "Yup," she said. "That's who I bought it from 32 years ago." Before I could even think up a way to ask, she offered, "You want to have a look around?" 30 minutes later, we had walked the entire 2 acres, including the house. Sharon's done amazing things with that place. Thanking her for her generosity and taking the time, I backed out of the driveway, pondering how nutty life is. That for 30 years, a place like this, in my head, was a dismal, dark, wet place. A place where I would trudge through the mud every morning at 6 a.m. and then again at 4 p.m. to feed the horses. A place I hated. When the reality is, it's a stunning 2 acres in a park-like setting smack dab in the middle of the Willamette Valley on Little Fall Creek. It's a beautiful place. It's called Fall Creek, Oregon. Clearly, I'm an idiot. Or more accurately, I was a teenager. So with this nostalgia in my head, you know I had to take a drive through Fall Creek and Lowell and learn a little more about them. Fall Creek? It's an unincorporated community in Lane County. It was named for the Fall Creek, a stream originating in the Willamette National Forest and flowing into the Middle Fork Willamette River, just below the community. The area was widely used by the Kalapuya tribe for fishing, hunting, and camping. It's tough to nail down exactly how long they lived in the area, but as one of the oldest indigenous peoples of the Pacific Northwest region, we do know that they inhabited the region for thousands of years. In 1856, the Kalapuya people were forced to sign treaties with the U.S. government, ceding away over 1 million acres of their land. They were relocated north to the Grand Ronde Indian Reservation, which spans just over 11,000 acres in Yamhill and Polk counties. The area is also home to the Pengra and Unity covered bridges, both built in the late 1930s to facilitate traffic in the area. Lane County has one of the largest number of covered bridges in the state, 20 of them. Some date back to the 1920s, and many are listed on the National Historic Registry, and several of these are within a short distance of Fall Creek. Today, with a population of around 1,500, Fall Creek continues to thrive as folks seek out rural areas just like this to live in while working in the nearby Eugene-Springfield area. And what about Lowell? Every town, I'm learning, has an interesting story, and Lowell is no different, beginning with its settlement and how it got its name. Lowell's story begins in the 1850s sometime, when a wagon train attempted to use the new free wagon road, which had been reported to enter the Middle Fork Valley by crossing the Cascades at a point near Summit Lake. Unfortunately for the settlers, the new road had been blazed but never actually constructed, which made their rate of travel quite a bit slower. Winter was approaching, so the immigrants sent one of their members, a Mr. Blanding, ahead to the valley to get help. Blanding reached the future site of Lowell when his horse went into labor and delivered a stillborn colt. Blanding then set up camp and built a fire to roast the colt. Blech! A very different time indeed. Anyway, settlers in the area saw the smoke, suspecting it was the work of hostile natives. They went to investigate. They found Blanding and sent help back up the river for the remaining immigrants in the Blanding party. The group would settle the area and opened the first post office, naming it Cannon. After a couple of years, the residents got tired of their mail being sent to places like Cannon Beach and Canyon City, so the post office was renamed Lowell. Some say the name was picked after another resident's hometown in Lowell, Maine. Other references can be made to Lowell, Illinois, so not exactly sure which one. Lowell actually did quite well economically all the way into the 50s and early 60s. At one time, the town boasted a drugstore, a liquor store, 3 cafes, 5 gas stations, 2 general stores, 2 barbershops, a tackle store, a shoe store, a hotel, a bulk fuel dealer, a wrecking yard, 2 tow truck businesses, and an auto mechanic shop. There was also a plywood patch manufacturing plant and their own American Legion Hall. Things would shift for Lowell as a result of the construction of the Fall Creek Dam. Construction of the dam would begin in 1961 as part of the Willamette Valley Dam System. Upon completion of the system, it would include 13 dams. The construction was developed mainly for flood control in the valley, but also provides significant recreation and power opportunities along the way. The Fall Creek Dam was completed in 1966. Its completion meant the loss of a lot of farmland and sawmills for Lowell. And at the same time, changes in policy with the U.S. Forest Service meant the loss of logging revenues, sawmill operations, and Forest Service jobs. The shift would send residents to Eugene and Springfield for work, and most would do their shopping there as well before they came home, meaning the small-town businesses of Lowell would die off over time. In recent years, the community has developed an industrial park in the town and brought a couple of players in the logging industry back to town, and even reestablished a gas station. In addition, you'll find a food manufacturing facility, a circuit board manufacturing facility, and even a dentist's office. But for the most part, the community continues to work towards holding onto and learning from its past while enjoying their spot on the map today and looking towards the future. Well done, Lowell. As for us, enough reminiscing for now. Climbing into the driver's seat wondering, where next? I don't know. Out there somewhere? And wondering, what are we going to learn there? Turns out, this thing called life comes with a lot of rules. Maybe it's time to break a few. Because you can. No, seriously, you can.